Hello and welcome to the Literary Love live show for Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. So this book was the May selection for the Literary Love Book Club, and per usual, we're coming on in the second or so week of June on a Sunday to talk about the book because I do like to give everybody plenty of time to read. So let me know in the comments if you're here. Of course, if you're not here, you can't let me know that, can you? So you can let me know if you read the book. We'll go on and get into ratings in just a little while. But before we go any further, I do want to introduce the famous Zela. This is my best friend that you've heard all the good things about if you've watched my YouTube videos. So, Zela, tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you if you want them to find you on social media, and a little bit about your interests and hobbies.
About myself, I have been married for 17 years and I have two children on the autism spectrum. I enjoy doing art. I enjoy reading a variety of different genres of books. And I love my best friend, Jennifer. And if anybody wanted to look at my art, I have an account. I believe it's just Zela Crabtree on Instagram.
And I can link that in the chat a little bit later if you all want to make sure you can find her because she is fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and check the comments and then we'll kind of get right into the book because I try to keep these live shows at an hour to an hour and a half, but there is a lot to discuss and unpack with Parable of the Sower, so we may run a little bit long today. But I do want to say hello to everyone who's here. Hello, Crystal. It's lovely to see you. I was just telling Zela that you had read the graphic novel. That's what she did this read because she had read like you. She'd read the novel a few years ago. So I was telling her all the good things about you. Hello, Stina. Lovely to see you today. Stina is the one who showed me dry teas, those teas I shared with you. So, Stina, you're also known to Zela. Hey, Stuart, just mentioned you. I told Zela you'd probably be here. It's nice to see you. And you too, Eleanor. So it's wonderful to see you. I had just told Zela that you would probably be here too. So
hello, everyone.
I'm so glad Zela joined me. This is the first time she's been on live with me. So y'all give her a lot of grace. Give me a lot of grace. She's nervous, but so am I. That's what I told her. It doesn't matter how many times I get on camera to do booktube stuff or presentations or teach. It's always a little bit scary, especially when you're live because I don't know what can happen, you know? Anything can happen. So now that we've done our little welcome, we're going to get right on into the synopsis of the story. Well, that should be taken across, but it's not. Hold on just a minute. See, y'all know what I'm saying. Sometimes we are on the, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that banner off that we have now. And even if it doesn't tick across the bottom, we're not going to worry about it. We will just be happy to keep it steady and still. All right, so I'm just going to go and pop up our, let me find it again. See, live, you never know. Story synopsis. So we're just going to keep it like that instead of ticking it across, and that will be fun. So the synopsis, and I'm just going to do this very briefly. Really barely scratching the surface of what the book's about. But this novel, Parable of the Sower, written by Octavia E. Butler, centers on Lauren Olamina, who is a young woman with a condition called hyperempathy, which is exactly what it sounds like. She's very extra empathetic, meaning she literally feels the pain of others. So she is seeking to establish a new religion and to lead survivors to what they hope will be safety amidst the horrors of a ravaged landscape and a collapsed and violent society. So that just kind of, like I said, gets you the gist of everything. Hey, Swank, so happy to see you here. Talked about you in a good way a moment ago, too. So now we're going to just go quickly into a brief biography of Octavia E. Butler. So, a little bit about her. She was an only child, and her mother was a maid. Excuse me, was a maid. Her father was a shoe shine person, and he died when she was only 7. So she did grow up very poor. Her family, they were devout Baptists, which we see those elements kind of interwoven into Parable of the Sower. But she did show an early interest in science fiction. She graduated with an Associate of Art degree from Cal State in LA, which is an offshoot of UCLA. And she also took writing classes at the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop and at, messed up. She attended Pasadena College, I should have said, at night, and she graduated there. And then she enrolled in the writing classes at Cal State and at the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Fellowship. She did win a MacArthur Fellowship, and many of her novels, including Parable of the Sower and its sequel, Parable of the Talents, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, and Kindred, are considered to be among the most important works of 20th century American literature. She also won a Hugo Short Story Award for her collection, Bloodchild, which I do have the collection on my shelf, but I have not read it yet. She did spend a great deal of her life in poverty, even with the success of her novels. She dealt with bouts of depression, which possibly played a role in why she didn't finish what she planned to do, which was a trilogy for Earthseed, Parable of the Sower, of course, then Parable of the Talents. And there was going to be a third one, Parable of the Trickster. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, too. But she did die at the age of 58. There's not yet, medical reports can't really pinpoint whether she had a stroke and that's what caused her fall and that's why she died, or if she died from the fall itself. So with that, just going to talk now a little bit about the sequel and then the third one that we didn't ever quite get. So I will too right now go ahead and give a heads up spoiler. This discussion will be political because you can't talk about this book. Books are political. Horror is political. This book is most certainly political. So we will be talking politics and we will be talking religion as well. So heads up there. Which if you've read the book, like I said, you couldn't really be here if you didn't expect that. So I do want to get some other aspects out of the way. Parable of the Talents, which was published in 1998, contains a new presidential candidate who sparks a violent movement centering around his promise to make America great again. Now, that book was published in 1998. We obviously know in our current time someone else who used Make America Great Again, but Butler's presidential candidate who used that slogan was actually inspired by Ronald Reagan, who did use the slogan himself in 1980, and then the Orange Dictator co-opted it also for his campaign. So that out of the way, we'll move on into some of the historical context. So the Parable of the Sower, oddly enough, is set between the years of 2024 and 2027, and it was published in 1993. It is a 20th century American fiction book, and it is considered to be apocalyptic and science fiction. One of the most important historically accurate events in the novel is the system of chattel slavery. Of course, when a person is enslaved and treated as property. So, slavery obviously existed in America between the 17th and 19th centuries, but several elements of that type of society returned in the antebellum era, such as the anti literacy rules, Jim Crow laws in the South, and we have seen a resurgence of those same type of laws or attempts at laws. The book also highlights the fact that even after slavery was abolished in 1863, those other types of slavery still continue. Like in the book Bankhole, I don't know if I'm saying his right. Bankhole. How did you say it?
Bankhole.
Okay, so Bankhole we'll talk about later, but he talks about debt slavery being widespread, and all of those things in combination with what we mentioned earlier about Make America Great Again and the extreme weather events. There's even a section in the book where one of the characters talks about an outbreak of measles that's killed a lot of people. So climate change, resurgence of diseases that had been wiped out because of vaccines coming back. So we really see that Octavia Butler had her finger on the pulse of what was coming. It's also an epistolary novel because we do find it's written from Lauren's diary entry. So that to me also lends a credibility and a reality to it because she's writing from her own experiences. So you had the parable of the sower, then you had the parable of the talents, and then the third one, as I mentioned, was going to be called the parable of the trickster. So after Butler published the parable of the talents, she started to just really get bogged down in the despair when she was doing the research for the third one. So she abandoned that third novel. Now, it's not clear whether obviously she may have abandoned it altogether, never planning to return to it, or she could have put it aside for a while and then passed away before she could actually get to it. So that's about it for that part, your historical context and literary context. So do you have anything you want to add? Or
I have no historical context to add.
Okay, so I don't see any comments popping up, but I will double check there. All right. So again, let's see. Now we're going to move on to ratings. So feel free to put in the comments what your rating was for Parable of the Sower. Zela, 1 to 5, what did you rate it?
When I read the novel, I rated it a 4, but I didn't really know why. I just knew that it was really good. And then I read the graphic novel today, and I rated it a 4. But I also kind of understand more why I liked it now.
Very nice. So I gave it a 5. It was bleak. It was tough to read. And it did take me quite a bit of time. So I was glad to have that 2-month window really for the May, book club book to be read in a little bit of June. Because it is an excellent book. But it's bleak, and especially given the context of our current time, very hard. So I could handle a little bit at a time, and then I have to be like, okay, I have to stop now because the news around me, like real life around me, was mirroring it quite a bit. So I'm going to check everybody's ratings now. Now the ticker is down at the bottom. I don't know. Now it's saying author bio. Things are just like not cooperating with me today. All right. So let's see. 4 stars, another 4-star there. 4-star. There we go. You're welcome. 5 stars. Yeah. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen the third book, but I completely understand why she had to, take a break because it's tough. It's tough. I would like to know too if anybody has read Parable of the Talents because neither Zela nor I have read it yet, and I want to read it, but I got to give myself a little more time. I'm glad you finished, so you can type it in 4. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So a 5-star for the novel, 4 for the graphic. Yeah. Yeah. Like Zela has the graphic novel right here. So I would like to read it sometime, but just to give y'all a little like with the imagery and stuff. I haven't had time to like flip through it, but I would like to flip through it. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to go into Parable of the Talents sometime this year, but probably toward November or something. I gotta have some time.
I don't know if I could do it, knowing that there's a third book that was never finished. Like I don't know if I can proceed.
Right? Yeah, because then we don't know. No, none of us know how the second one ends. So if it ends really bleak, and then you're hoping for a,
yeah,
I don't know either. It might be even tougher. So we'll see. We'll see if we go into it. Maybe I'll do it next year. Let me know if I pick it for a 2027 Literary Love Book Club selection. Let me know if y'all would be interested. If y'all want to do it, put ourselves through this again next year. And then I can force you to read it and make you come on the next live show.
I'll do anything for you.
Don't say I would never make her do anything against her will. Just so y'all know. So now we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pop up spoilers because we are about to get into the characters. And so there may be some spoilers that come through here. Now, there are so many different characters in the novel. So I do just want to let everybody know that we're not going to be going over every single character because there's just not, enough time frame for that. But we will, if you have other characters you want to talk about, we may have time maybe at the end. So here's your spoiler fair warning. If you haven't read it, then you may want to go off, read it, and then come back. Or if you have read it, or if you don't care about spoilers, then let's go ahead and get into this bleak text. Somebody check our comments too. Yeah, it may have. Like I haven't read the graphic novel, but I can see that it might have made it easier to handle. So we don't have that. Oh, Stuart, you and I were thinking along the same lines. Yeah, like I have all my book club picks for this year, but I think I will do it next year. Since Stuart said, yeah, maybe so. Understand that. There's probably a graphic novel of it, I would think. Oh yeah, I have not read from her. This is my first time. Like I do have Blood Child in my TBR card, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But I definitely want to read her other stuff too because she has me hooked on this one. Even as tough as it was to get through. So now we will talk some characters. So we will start with Lauren. Zela, is there anything you want to share about Lauren before I blab my whole blabbing?
I feel like she was just a really brave character, like the whole time, because she saw things that people didn't see, and she wasn't afraid to talk about it or, present a different way of seeing the world. And I just like her.
I did too. I know some people have criticized the fact that she was 15 and she had all of these thoughts. They said, "Oh, that couldn't be a 15-year-old," which I would argue, yes, it can. I know 15-year-olds who think that way. I might have been a 15-year-old who thought that way. So I think that does a great disservice to our teenagers, because she is 15 at the beginning, and over the course of the novel, by the time we get to the end, she's 18. Um, you know, really, we're going to talk more about her hyper empathy when we get to the symbolism. But I will say that her hyper empathy, I think, made her especially attuned to not only other people, but just to truth. Like you said, she confronted things. We'll talk more about that when we get to the themes too of truth versus denial. And then a lot of people around her, like her father and then her brother Keith, who we'll talk about in a minute, they saw her hyper empathy as a weakness or something to be ashamed of. But even though there was the bad side to it, because she literally felt the pain of others, it also made her more understanding of other people, more willing to be brave, like you said, and find a way to survive. And again, like I said, we'll talk about that more when we get to hyper empathy, and then caring about other people versus not caring about other people. So I'm gonna check our comments to see what. Yeah, there were some aspects that I had to kind of think about, try to wrap my brain around her religion, but there were parts I really was like, okay, I get what you're saying, I get it. Sometimes I'd have to read it a few times and be like, okay. But we'll definitely be talking about that some more too when we get to themes and symbols. Yes, exactly. Yeah, she was in that world, like you said, Crystal, where she was having to confront all of these things in real life. I feel like the same is true for our kids today. I teach teenagers, and these things are on their minds and evident to them for sure. Yep, exactly. Other people would kind of, shield their eyes or be in a denial. And she just took those scales off and met everything head on. I totally agree. Sorry, that was my phone. It's turned down, but it still made a buzz noise. So now let's talk a little bit about her father, Reverend Olamina. Do you have anything you want to say about Reverend Olamina?
I like that she said, I forget her exact wording, but she said he was the best man she knew or something like that. So, like, not vilifying him for his ignorance or like his inability to see what she saw. Like, she still respected him and like found value in who he was despite their, differences.
I liked him too. I liked that he was a multi-layered character, like you said. He was willfully ignorant sometimes, and of course her beliefs are different from his because he's a Baptist minister, so he has that staunch Baptist belief. And she, I guess, cares enough about him. She doesn't really want to let him know that she's not believing the same way because she does get baptized. And I also thought it was interesting that not only was he a minister, but he was also a college professor and a dean. So he had like this academic learning too. And he was respected, as a leader in the community. And he did, of course, have those limitations. Like you said, they really come in the form of his refusal or resistance to confront reality and his wishful thinking that the world would go back to the way it once was, whatever that means, right? We don't, well, how was it once? Was it better? And, I don't know, atrocities happen now and atrocities happen in the past. But we all have that tendency, I think, to romanticize the past, or when the world gets heavy, we do tend to turn away. But I think there's a difference in taking a break from the news cycle and completely denying the reality of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then it was obviously devastating because he just disappeared one day and they never really got clarification of what happened to him, which we'll talk a little bit about Keith in a minute, and the difference between not getting clarification about what happened to her father and then getting clarification about what happened to Keith. But to me, also, like, just to speak of some of the disturbing elements in the book, when they're out looking for Reverend Olamina and they find an arm and they're like, it could be his, they can't tell. And then they just briefly, because I don't want to get into this right this moment, but they hear the man, screaming and hollering, like who knows what's being done to him. So those are just like the just gritty, like just ingrained in my head kind of images from this novel. And also, without getting too heavy into it right now, that's so real. That happens now. It is happening now. It's been happening now. We see similar things on the news, and it's just, it's just confronting that, and not turning away from it. Okay, that was very heavy. All right, so now we're going to move on to, well, I didn't ask if you have any comments. Obviously, I may forget to say, if you have comments about the character, put it in there. So just know that if you have something to say about the character, please put it in the comments. So then we have Corey, who is Lauren's stepmother. What did you think about Corey?
To be honest, I didn't think much about Corey. That's all I had to say.
She favors Keith. And again, it confused Lauren as to why she favored Keith so much. Because Keith was a difficult child, but I mean, that's the way it goes. Sometimes I, as a parent, I have 4 kids. I do not favor any of one of my kids over the other. That's terrible when it happens. I know you love both of your kids too. I think you favor one over the other. I mean, sometimes one kid may be easier to manage than another. That doesn't mean you, it doesn't mean we favor the kid to the detriment of the other kids. And for the most part, Corey and Lauren get along pretty well. But once Keith goes missing, there starts to be more of tension between them. And then Corey also, she's very naive. She immediately wants to go live in Olivar, that town that's being privatized. And her husband, at least, Reverend Olamina, we have talked about how he didn't want to confront reality, but he is aware of what that means if they went to Olivar, to the privatized community. He's like, no, you don't really want to do this. So she just is kind of one of those characters that isn't maybe as aware as the others. Then we have Keith, Lauren's brother. What do you want to say about Keith?
I mean, he wanted to get out and see what was happening. You can't really blame somebody for that. And obviously he was doing some sketchy stuff, to get his resources that he brought back when he would come back. But I don't know. I guess curiosity killed the cat is kind of what I think of.
Yeah. Yeah. I got very irritated and angry with him, but then I had to remind myself that he was only 12 years old. Now he could be cruel. He was cruel a lot of times to Lauren and to his siblings. But he did have that desperation to grow up, like you said, and get out there and to see what's happening. And then, he's given that gun, that BB gun on his 13th birthday, and then he goes out and, presumably we just kind of figure he's probably selling drugs or, like you said, doing some other kind of sketchy stuff. But part of that too is a desperation in a time like they're living. He's got an opportunity to bring back resources to the family.
To help.
Yeah, as misguided as it was. But then, for him to have been tortured and to be killed in the way that he was horrifying. So I do want to just for a moment talk about that contrast that Lauren talks about between not knowing what happened to her dad and then knowing exactly what happened to Keith. So I think she said that it was easier in some ways to deal with what happened to Keith because they knew what happened to him than to not have exact closure. I mean, they can pretty much figure, she says as much, that her dad died, but they don't have that clarification. So I think that's a difficult, spot to be in. Do you think one would be easier than the other?
I think knowing for sure, because like I have a personal friend who lost a brother that they never found a body or anything. They just assumed that he's died, but he had mental illness and he would wander away, sometimes, and they still to this day don't like have closure on it, and it's still hard for her. So I would think the not knowing would be the most difficult, because then you might have like this seed of thought, like maybe they just went away from this, maybe they found a easier path, I don't know. There's just a lot of things you think about when you don't know what happened.
I agree. I think as horrible as it is what happened to Keith, I think for the family to know and to be able to deal with deal with it head on, instead of having this hope that may never come to fruition. I think either thing is horrible, but I think that would be easier. I hate to use the word easy, but you know what I mean, like to handle it. And then I want to talk just a little bit about Franklin Bankhole, who's the 57-year-old man that Lauren eventually hooks up with, which it sounds on the surface 18 and 57. I don't know what to say about that. If that happened nowadays, I'd be like, ooh. But in the
apocalypse,
that's what I said. So I agree. So what did you think of that?
Well, I mean, she's got daddy issues now because they never knew what happened to her dad. So I think it's really like, from a psychology perspective, probably a lot to do with like having a male figure to kind of like be a point of strength for her. That's how I see it. But, apocalypse makes you do funny things.
And even he hesitated, he kept talking about how young she was, but she reminded him, that she's 18. And I think, like we talked about earlier, like Crystal mentioned too, about growing up in that kind of an environment is going to make you grow up a lot faster. Like her 18-year-old is much different from an average 18-year-old. And I just think the way too that he supported her, even at the point when he didn't understand Earthseed and he questioned her, but he never like made her feel foolish or anything else. And so I really liked his character a lot. So briefly, a little bit about Zara, who was in the neighborhood. Really not much to say except, she joins Lauren later. She escaped the neighborhood after it burned down. And her tragedy too, like having her baby shot and die in her arms and then seeing her baby thrown into the fire. But then Harry Balter, who also escaped Lauren's neighborhood when the Painted Faces came in and killed people and burned everything down. He is white, so that's part of some of the conversation too that we'll talk about in a little while is the community of both Black people and white people, and some of the comments that Lauren made about how it was viewed for them to be together. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into some of our themes. We may mention other characters in passing, but I felt like those were the main characters that we really needed to talk about. Did you have any other characters that you wanted to mention? All right. So now we will switch banners to our. Okay, so that's going to scroll at the bottom for us. Okay. So elements, themes, and symbolism. So I want to start with talking about inclusion versus exclusivity. So what did you think about the dynamic kind of between inclusivity and exclusivity?
I guess like they had their whole community and it's walled off and they're trying to protect themselves from the bad things outside where people are killing other people and doing all these horrible things. But at the same time, like they've got resources and they want to keep themselves safe, but the people outside don't have any resources. So it kind of makes it creates more conflict because it's that way, because it's separate. And I'm not saying it's the only reason there's a conflict, but that's what I thought.
It was a difficult, concept to try to decide how much inclusivity should be, and then how much exclusivity. Like the thing too, which also reminded me so much of our current time. The very rich people, they were able to pretty much be safe within their very, secure, communities. They could flee dangerous situations in a helicopter if they wanted to. So we're talking like these top billionaires, maybe even a trillionaire, that were able to just get away if need be. So the middle class, like Lauren and her family, would be more of the middle class, which I mean, that's pretty much how I think most of us here would identify, like middle class. They secured themselves, like you said, within this gated community, but we find out that unfortunately their security really wasn't enough to protect them. And so Lauren, again, I think this is where her hyper empathy comes into it too. She points out that excluding people from a community will breed violence and resentment. And just simply by existing in that gated community, Lauren's neighborhood, they put the whole neighborhood in danger. But again, they have no choice because they have to have the wall to keep people out. But then the people who are out, they are even worse off than Lauren. So even though Lauren and her family don't have much, the people in the neighborhood are barely scraping by. Those who are outside of it, in their minds, they have this impression that the people living within
have a lot more.
Yeah, have a lot more. So they want to break in and get it. And then the book's account of how the United States descended into this apocalyptic state also emphasized the connection between exclusion and destruction. So Lauren talks about the history of racial and socioeconomic inequality in the United States, and talks about how that directly led to that dystopian landscape that we see in the novel. And so really the novel is suggesting that excluding groups of people based on their race or their gender or their class or their sexual orientation, that will create this climate of mistrust and violence. So that's something that we do see again now. So that was just one of the things out of the many that really hit me as I look around at things that are being said and things that are being done. Even within June, this month of Pride, and we see so much hate sometimes, like just for no reason other than just pure hate. Any thoughts about that?
About hate?
Yes. About hate for people who may look different or have different status than we do.
Well, I mean, I think it's wrong to hate people, but I don't know how to relate that back to the book.
I understand.
And I love all my neighbors, all my queer neighbors.
Yes.
All of them deserve to live a life that they want to live and be happy the way they want to be happy.
How did I miss all these comments, y'all?
Lord, it's a lot.
It didn't pop up till now.
I'm going to go to the restroom. Well,
yes, feel free. She will be right back. Yes, she did. She was a leader, and I think that hyper empathy helped her to be such a great leader. Yeah, talking about Keith, yeah. Or maybe Reverend Olamina there, yeah. Yes, I think so too. That's why, there were parts of him, he's having to make decisions, if he has to consider if he is to just leave like Lauren wants him to do. He does have to think about what that would mean for the community. For a little bit of time, they were safe behind their walls. Yeah. So yeah, if you're talking about Corey, yeah. So Lauren, I should have mentioned Lauren. I did mention like Corey is Lauren's stepmother. So the 4 sons that she has are her sons. So Keith would be her son, and Lauren is her stepdaughter. And Lauren actually developed hyper empathy because her mother took a drug while she was pregnant with Lauren, and that led to this condition of hyper empathy. Yeah. Exactly. It was so brutal and violent. Yeah, I agree. I think we're getting a lot of people with like agreeing with knowing. Yeah, the age difference, like initially is like what, but then when you get into Lauren's maturity and into like Zela said, an apocalypse, then you can understand that. Oh yeah, absolutely happen in real life. Very much so. Especially if things continue to worsen. Goodness. So that was one of the things too that I meant to mention at the beginning and I didn't. My edition of Parable of the Sower, there's an interview with Octavia Butler in the back, and the interviewer asked her what she wants people to get out of the novel. And she says, I'm going to paraphrase of it. She says she wants people to think about how it relates to what they're seeing in the United States, since that's where, she set the novel, that's where she lived. And to ask themselves, do they like the direction that the United States is going? And if not, what can you do to change it? So I feel like she very much put those thoughts in our mind with this novel. So like I said, I'm sorry I didn't get the comments, but it didn't show that I had any until right then. So I am so sorry if y'all thought I was ignoring y'all. So now, if I can find my notes and see where we left off, we're still on the symbolism. So very good. So now let me again make sure I don't forget anything with the symbolism. So creation and destruction. So you had both creation and destruction in the novel. So, Zela, did you have any thoughts? I'm always I'm gonna ask you first before I blah blah blah.
Um, hmm. We're talking about the themes.
Yeah, the
Symbolism.
creation, destruction, rebirth. It's themes right now.
We're in themes. I don't know. Jeez. I just read some stuff on the internet, so I can't give you like my actual thoughts because I didn't think much about that particular thing. But I can tell you what the internet said.
Well, tell us. That's research. Tell us.
The internet talked about the acorns having to do with creation and the fire having to do with destruction.
Yes.
And it seems like there's a corollary between that goes, never mind, that's the symbolism. I'm holding it back for the
yes. Yeah, we were going to get into a lot of details about the fire and the acorns when we get to symbolism, because they do figure, though, like you said, in the whole creation, destruction, and rebirth. Another theme in the novel too, though, is that this seemingly unstoppable destruction does not necessarily it's not necessarily going to be absolute or permanent. While the world is certainly ending and falling apart right in front of the character's eyes, there are other worlds or other communities that are being created. So to me, that was one aspect that I could see as somewhat hopeful. So I did have a few quotes I wanted to talk about in terms of the creation versus destruction. So one of the things that I tabbed, if I can, well, you know what? Let me go ahead and read this, because I meant to read this quote a moment ago when we talked about inclusivity and exclusion, and the dividing yourselves up when you should be joining together. Embrace diversity, unite or be divided, robbed, ruled, killed by those who see you as prey. Embrace diversity or be destroyed. So I felt like that was an important quote when you did have Lauren at one point talking about how people would sometimes give like sidelong glances out in public if they saw a group of people walking together, and some of the group was white and some of the group was black. So just to be reminded that we are all humans and that we are all collectively in this together. And then going on to the next theme of creation versus destruction. And the idea that just because everything is falling apart and everything looks like total annihilation doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. So Lauren said, we can get ready. That's what we've got to do now. Get ready for what's going to happen. Get ready to survive it. Get ready to make a life afterward. Get focused on arranging to survive so that we can do more than just get batted around by crazy people, desperate people, thugs and leaders who don't know what they're doing. And that really stood out to me right now, is, for reasons too, not just the novel, but current times, that we can get ready for what comes after. We can be strong, we can fight, and we can build a life and know that there is something better coming after. We have to hope for that. Anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good.
So now we're going to move on to another one of the topics that people always say you should never talk about, right? Never talk politics and religion. And we're just going to talk about both. So let me dig through and find my notes about religion. Okay. So what did you think of the representation of religion in the book? I'll put you on
I
the spot.
loved it. I loved it.
Yeah.
I like just like in general for myself, I like the concept that God has changed, and it doesn't make sense to say like, and this is my own going back to former previous beliefs. You always hear God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but like everything we see in this world changes. Nothing is just always the same, so it doesn't make sense to me, and it never really has. So like a concept that God has changed is refreshing.
I agree. I'm going to check the comments now, even though it's not showing me I have any. Sometimes, like I said, it was moving slow. Okay, I don't see any comments, so if you're commenting, maybe it'll show it to me. So really this begins, the novel, we've kind of talked about this, opens up with Lauren's conflicted feelings about being a Baptist and how that's no longer really what she believes, even though she goes ahead and gets baptized. So then you have the conclusion of the novel where alongside each other, you've got some passages from Christianity and then some passages from Lauren's, religion that she's formed and invited others into Earthseed. So in the latter half of Parable of the Sower, we really start to see Earthseed begin to attract other believers. And so it just kind of grows out from there, from this set of ideas and observations that Lauren makes into this real, actual community of believers. And so, like you said, contrasted with Christianity, Earthseed really addresses how God has changed in the same way that what we see around us changes. Also, something else that the novel does is it kind of depicts Christianity as more of a false sense of hope against a reality that's chaotic and brutal. And that central idea of Earthseed, like you mentioned about God is change, that really, makes the followers of Earthseed accept that God has changed, and also they have the power to shape God. That was something else that she, the Earthseed verses repeated a lot. Shaping God, we have the power to shape God. So if you think about it in terms of the novel, then Earthseed really provides the characters with a more tangible sense of hope than Christianity did, because instead of praying to God for some sort of mercy or justice, the followers of Earthseed instead work to change the world themselves. So I thought that was interesting. I am no longer a Christian. I did grow up in church, and I did, adhere to Christianity until about 7 or so years ago. I do consider myself an atheist now, but I do remember a lot of scripture. And speaking of like change and being active for yourself, there is a scripture passage. I think it might be in James, but it says faith without works is dead.
I don't know what the scripture.
So
I mean, I've heard that one. I just don't know what the reference.
So I kind of, I did think about too that depending, some, and I don't know, but some people, like Christianity may think that you should be doing work. So you have, I'm not gonna like put all Christians into one box, because if you're here and you're a Christian, you're welcome, of course. But I did just kind of think about how there were some similarities between Earthseed and Christianity. Another thing that the novel really does is to point out that one of the reasons that people may be attracted to Christianity or other, more mainstream kinds of religion is because it gives them hope of an afterlife. And within the context of the world in which they live, and honestly, I mean, on the world in which we live, our daily reality really, sometimes people may feel that the only hope for redemption or, some sort of joy after this would be in an afterlife. So that's something that Lauren and Earthseed, instead of proposing this afterlife, it's a way of finding the joy and the hope in the everyday life where we're living right now. Did you have anything about that you?
Well, I was thinking about the comment somebody said about the space stuff being unclear, and I do feel like it's a little bit unclear because it feels a little too weird for her to be like finding their place among the stars. You know, what the heck does that mean? But then, like, I also think about how Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to talk about that we're all made of the stars, and so if you're thinking like scientifically, maybe the third book was about like us returning to the energy of the universe and becoming, just part of all of it, the stars, the space, everything. I don't know. That's just what was on my mind.
And I do know, like in the novel, the President Donner, he's doing away with the space program, and that upsets Lauren because she is really thinking about, she is really thinking about restarting, on another planet. So I think literally too, the idea of restarting in the stars, she may literally be talking about, going to a different planet because the climate change aspect too. The Earth is being destroyed, so we may have to start again somewhere else. So I think there is definitely the metaphysical kind of aspect, like you said, and then I think too also a realistic aspect of being, on another planet that hopefully people wouldn't destroy again. But
if we can get to it, we can destroy it.
That is the truth. That is. So I did want to share a few quotes too in terms of Earthseed and the view of God in Earthseed. So the first one is, God is power, infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent, and yet God is pliable, trickster, which would have been the third novel, Parable of the Trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped. God is changed. And that's part of the scripture from Earthseed, not from Christianity, from Earthseed. But then in her diary, Lauren goes on a little bit to expound on this. And she wrote, God can't be resisted or stopped, but can be shaped and focused. This means God is not to be prayed to. Prayers only help the person doing the praying, and then only if they strengthen and focus that person's resolve. God exists to be shaped and will be shaped with or without our forethought, with or without our intent. And I will say that in the latter part of my being a Christian, this line right here is really how I felt. Prayers only help the person doing the praying, and then only if they strengthen and focus that person's resolve. Because I felt like it didn't really matter what I was praying, what was going to happen would happen. But it was strengthening my resolve, or it was for me. So do you have any thoughts or response about that idea?
I agree with you. And I agree with her perspective in the book and kind of what she's trying to say about the importance and like the job of prayer. Like, shouldn't be really to expect it to change something, but really more about like just you.
And I would love to know what you all think in the comments, even if you think something differently from us. We're all, see, now I'm glad I checked the comments again. It's not showing up.
Wasn't showing any of them.
So we got an amen. I don't know what that was too, Swank, but hopefully it was something good that we said. Yeah, I felt like that too. Like I wasn't always exactly sure. And I would go back and read it and think about it. But I did feel like it's something else too that Earthseed did. And I have it in my notes somewhere, but I'm gonna try to remember it in case I forget to do it again. But Earthseed was something that, because it changes and because it's more like a poetic kind of form, it can't necessarily be read exactly literally. So it gives itself more, lending to adapting for the changing time. Whereas the Bible, for example, not everyone who's a Christian reads it literally, but some do. And if they read it literally, then they're not giving it any adapting over time sort of mindset, So I just, I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but I just thought the way that Earthsea was written, it was more adaptable, and could be more relevant to whatever time period it's being practiced in.
Yeah, and well, it goes back to like how biblically inerrant your beliefs are. The people that believe that the Bible has no mistakes, they're gonna have a real hard time, adjusting culturally to any kind of changes, like we saw with the civil rights movement, right, and all that kind of stuff. And now that we're seeing with LGBTQ rights and everything, even when the culture shifts, they want to hold tight to something that doesn't really serve humanity.
Exactly. Even to the detriment of other people. Mm-hmm. They're so focused on these rules and regulations that they can't get their heads out of their butts. I'll say it. Yes, I like that too. Exactly. It was something that the people could do, instead of just sitting back and being like, okay, something in, whoever, just do this for us. Exactly. I like that too. Oops. Yep, that too. Yep. Just wanting answers and seeing things that didn't make sense. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I feel that too, because we've already have these billionaires just going up to space like they did, just going on up there. Trillionaires. I'm not going to quit saying trillionaire. If you know, you know. That's on my mind right now. Trillionaires. Yeah, it would be something that the rest of us, it's like some of them who have these bunkers in case of, apocalyptic events. The rest of us are just going to be out here, like you said, trying to fend for ourselves. In a lot of ways, we are even doing that now. Let's see. Yeah, that James quote. I think it's from James. If anybody is a Christian, you may be able to let me know. But about, faith without works is dead. I think that makes you exactly, Stuart. I'm gonna say, I think that makes you exactly what a Christian should be. A follower of Christ. The stuff in the Old Testament, not believing that. I will tell you this, like, my priest, when I was Catholic, I was in confession one time and I told him, and I'm not going to give you his name because I don't want to get him in trouble, because I still love him to death, even though I'm not Catholic anymore. But I was in confession one time and I said, I can't make sense of the Old Testament. I can't see, this same God who's supposed to be Jesus saying, go in this land and kill everybody, women, children. Why does somebody want a bunch of foreskins of the enemy's, army? What is happening? Can't make sense of this. And he said, the Old Testament, don't you worry about that. I was like, okay. He said, we're talking about the New Testament. We're talking about Christ. And I definitely want to pinpoint on this last thing you said, a problem with the people in power weaponizing. Yes, I will say it right now. Maggots, the cult, Absolutely weaponizing and using it as a tool for oppressing and abusing anybody who doesn't agree with them. We see it with Ice Baby. We see, the horrors there. We see what's being done, on a regular basis. Laws being passed against the LGBTQ community. Zela and I here, we live in Alabama. So we have that here. We have redistricting of, the voting sections to, keep people of color from having as much power and vote. So all of this under the guise, so-called, of, God, which is just absolutely infuriating. So I completely agree, Stuart. But I think I know you from BookTube, and I feel like you're the representative of Christ in a real kind of way. Thank you. Yeah, it was a struggle too. Like I said, I had to read it a few times to kind of figure it out, Eleanor. Yep, yep. That whole part too, the follower of Christ patterning after Jesus, because as many years as I spent in Christianity, I still like the tenets that Jesus taught. Absolutely. And it is so far, what he taught is so far removed from this weaponization of Christianity in the United States. You couldn't be any more opposite. Like, I mean, I'm not the first one who said this, but it's on the internet and it's true. That is, don't take that out of context. That doesn't sound right. It's on the internet and it's true. But it's like this statement that, the people who are a part of this weaponizing of Christianity and a part of, Make America Great Again, if Jesus walked up to them, they would have him deported. I mean, it's just such a, cognitive dissonance between what they say they believe and what they really do. Definitely. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's a good question. That's a very good question. I told y'all we couldn't help but get a little religious. You're welcome, Stuart. And those were sincere. Yeah, she did. She had her finger on the pulse of what was coming. A warning, really, a warning to us. And then she went and left us, unfortunately. Yes, definitely. Definitely. So now we will we will go on to truth, which we've kind of hinted at a few times. This whole idea of truth and being willing to confront truth, and even when it wasn't easy to confront, versus this comfortable kind of denial. Um, what are your thoughts?
I wrote down the adults are in denial about the state of the world. And it's kind of like, I guess I kind of think about like people that actively try to like protect their children from some amorphous fear that they have of like gay people or whatever. And so they know that these people exist. They know they're, just living their lives, but they don't even want to tell their kid they exist. They don't even want to have the conversation. And so it seemed like the adults were like that. Like they know about it, but they're like, well, I don't want them to be scared and I don't want something bad to happen to them. I don't want them to be thinking about this bad stuff. So like, we're not going to be completely straight about everything that's going on, because even the dad, is like, well, it's time to show you, what's under the tree or whatever, where they buried the money. So like he knew there might be a time that could leave. So that's what I wrote, and then I wrote, our experiences are our truths. That was just something I thought of. Like people say, you know, there's only like one truth. And then there's the other side of it, which I can't remember the naming for it, but where like everybody decides their own truth. But like if something's happened to you, then it's true. It's your experience. I don't know.
Yes.
I feel like I'm right.
No, that's like subjectivity, right? Your own experiences. And we're we've been told not to believe what we've seen with our very eyes, and what we know to be true. So throughout the novel, like we have talked about, Lauren is someone who seeks the truth while others around her remain like in this state of denial. She faces the horror of the conditions that are around her so she can work to build a better future. And then talking like you did, like, and kind of how we did at the beginning, even though at the start of the novel Lauren's only 15, I think it is her youth that helps her to access the truth in a way that the adults can't. So it's kind of you hear quite often said, wisdom comes with age, but that's not always true. It can, but I think it really depends on the person. And then too, you also have young people like Lauren's best friend Joanna, who she knows what's out there, and Lauren tells her her plan to leave. And then Joanna runs and tells her mother, which then her mother tells Lauren's father, and her father talks to her about not saying that to people because you'll upset people. So he knows, like you said, because of the hidden money. And then Joanna knows, but she says, we're 15. What can we do? And so she, even with her youth, doesn't have that courage or that ambition that Lauren does. And I've got to read a few quotes about truth that I just was like, damn, y'all got this going on. Olivia, who's Olivia? Octavia Butler. I don't know who Olivia is.
Olivia Newton-John.
So part of too, like the opening, really, when she talks about Earthseed, the word truth is in there. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So really, we see at the very beginning of the novel that truth is change, and that to accept that truth, you cannot be in denial. You see the changes happening in the world around you. You can't turn away from that. So like going into it, it's like we already kind of get the thesis or what the novel's really going to be about. And then, I'm as guilty sometimes as the next person of denial, whether it be about certain things happening in this country that my brain, I don't want to face it. I will make myself face it, but then there are sometimes I'm just like, no, I don't want to think about this. And then like sometimes in everyday life, like if I don't want to deal with the situation that's happening in my personal life, sometimes I'll just, ignore it. I'll deny it. Do you ever do it?
Yes.
I know you do. We talk.
Yes.
So like on page 61, Lauren talks about Joanna telling on her, and she's like, did Joanna just think this, telling on me was gonna keep these things from happening? And she says, this is just more denial. A dumb little game of, if we don't talk about bad things, maybe they won't happen. That's what I think sometimes, but I know it's not true. But I mean, there's that tendency. And then this quote, this conversation that Lauren has with her dad about that community of Olivar that's going to be, privatized. And so it's supposed to be safer now because you're going to have all this, this protection there. But they're trying to get workers in, and they do talk about how the minimum wage is going to be like really low there, and they're going to drop a lot of the safety regulations to try to bring more workers in. And so really, are you going to be safer there? And what is your exchange, right? Safety versus autonomy or freedom, and who's going to keep you safe from the powers that be? And Lauren said, or her father, I think, yeah, her father said to her, I wonder how many of the people in Oliver have any idea what they're doing. And then Lauren said, I don't think many do. I don't think they dare let themselves know. That reminds me of people who deny what is happening right now in the United States. They won't let themselves know. They know, but they won't let themselves know. And then Lauren said her dad looked at her and she said, I looked back. I'm still learning how dogged people can be in denial, even when their freedom or their lives are at stake. He's lived with it longer. I wonder how. And I asked the same question, like, how long can you just deny this? How can you sit and know that it's your freedom, and you just pretend like it's not happening? And then her dad said, freedom is dangerous. Talking to Corey, who wanted to go to Oliver. Freedom is dangerous, Corey, but it's precious too. You can't just throw it away or let it slip away. You can't sell it for bread and pottage. And I thought that was like so profound, that you can't just exchange your freedom. And it made me think of how often we have exchanged our freedom for security, going back to, the Patriot Act from George W. Bush and the Department of Homeland Security, what that means now, what they do now. So I couldn't help but really, again, just think about the real life correlations with this novel. Oh, Lord, y'all, we have been going, oh, well, you know what? No, we didn't start at 1. We started at 2 my time. I thought we started at 1. I was like, we have 2.5 hours. So we're doing okay on time. I warned y'all this one might be long. I thought for a moment I'd really made it into almost 3 hours. So let's see what we have next on the chart. I am just trying to go through this. Trying to make sure I don't forget anything. So one of the aspects we had was the written word, and I kind of think we probably covered most of that because we talked about the epistolary format, that is Lauren's diary. We talked about the writing of Earthseed, how that is something that's going to last and be adapted and changed. One of the meta kind of aspects of the novel too is that there is a part where Lauren talks about science fiction books that her grandmother had that were about apocalyptic events, and how that's kind of helped Lauren kind of realize what's going on in her world. And then it's meta in the aspect because the novel Parable of the Sower itself is science fiction about the apocalyptic, kind of society. And Octavia Butler wrote that, and now we're reading it and recognizing stuff in it. Was there anything else you thought about the writing?
No, I didn't write anything.
Okay. And then, just briefly, that aspect of found family. Did you want to say anything about found family?
I think I remember because I was thinking about it on the way here. It seems like in the beginning she was kind of like, no, we don't need to add anybody to our group. And then like over time, she started to be like, oh, well, you know, we could help these people or these people or these people. And so that was nice to kind of see, like, I don't know, the progression of her like wanting to include more people. Because like she wanted to, but I think like it was just like the fear at the beginning of like, what if they hurt us or want to take our resources or whatever. So,
yeah. And then like I think like found family too. Like I consider Zela my found family. And I consider all of you in the booktube community, you all, you know, a found family. And you know, some people that's the only family they have, because their families have rejected them, or their families have been, you know, sucked into maybe a certain political mentality. And so their family is no longer family to them. And, you know, along the road, like you said, it was scary for Lauren to decide who to include. And there were sometimes she would, you know, feel like I can't, you know, these people aren't safe to include. And so you had to have like this a discretion about yourself. But then she, you know, found the people and even found other people who had hyper empathy like she did, which really started to explain why they acted some of the ways that they acted initially, because of that hyper empathy. So now we are going to go on to symbolism, and speak about hyper empathy. So hyper empathy, to me, there were quite a few things I thought about. But Zela, I'm gonna let you go first and talk about hyper empathy.
okay. I guess with that whole thing, it brought up not long ago when there was a lot of information in the news about having the sin of empathy, or maybe not in the news. I guess more
It
like
was.
popular. Was it in the news?
It was in the news. Mhm.
But there was a lot of debate, like in religious circles, about was it good to have empathy for people that you might consider to be sinful or like engaging in sinful things? Should we give them empathy? And yeah, I feel like it's another one of those weird things in this book that's like, how is this so specific to like this time period, that this was like such a big deal and she has this hyper empathy? Like it's so coincidental.
Yes.
But we do have like, it's in the world today, we find that like there's a big group of people that are not empathetic towards anyone. And then there's like, it seems like the opposite. Like you've got people on two extreme sides. And so you have people that care about everybody. And then it feels like people that care about nothing but themselves. And it's kind of a hard thing to reconcile.
That's what I thought about. Very similar to the idea of hyper empathy. It reminded me, like you said, of that dichotomy between those of us who care about what happens to other people, especially other people who don't look like us, people who don't live where we live. We genuinely care about people. And then you have the other side who, like you said, doesn't give a shit about anybody else.
It feels like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too, broad to say they don't, but like it feels like they don't.
I would say some of them don't, because some of them not only don't give a crap about what happens to people who look different from them, people who are, in other countries, they are even immigrants in our country. You've got that certain side that not only doesn't care about them, but they rejoice in their suffering. They celebrate it. They laugh at it. So that also is, it can be seen in the words people say in real life. Certainly you don't want to, put yourself through comment sections, but sometimes you see stuff and, people are just cruel and you want to think, no, that's just people online, but you hear people in your real life say that kind of stuff. And it's blows my mind. Just the hate that they have. And then, like you said, that concept about this so-called sin of empathy. I haven't read it, but I know it's a book actually titled The Sin of Empathy, written by Joe Rigney. I don't know who he is, and I don't care. And this concept of like empathy being a sin was something that trillionaire Musk had said back a long time ago when he was still doing that Doge thing, whatever he did. But he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about what he called civilizational suicidal empathy within the context of the cuts that were being made to government spending. So it's just this mindset of empathy being a bad thing to have. And then the quote that I wanted to share too. It's beyond me how one human being could do that to another. If hyper empathy syndrome were a more common complaint, people couldn't do such things. I mean, totally, because if people had empathy, they wouldn't be doing some of these things that we see them do. I'm going to check the comments before we get into the next aspect of symbolism because I don't want to miss any. Here we go.
Blob the blue.
That's Josh. Yes, I agree with that too. Because like you said, she does accept and know what's happening. She doesn't turn away from it. But at the same time, she does have hope for a better future, and she's really working for that. Definitely. Living in denial. Yeah, you know it. Exactly. It's, this whole idea of, oh, we're going to protect you and take your rights away, which is, what was happening in Oliver and what we see happening, in our real life for sure. Yep, exactly. And that's, something that could be or maybe on the horizon, or already I think we're seeing seeds of that right now. Definitely. And it is scary, like you said. It is over. It is over if that is the case. Yeah, because she did meet the other ones that had hyper empathy. I think there were like maybe 3 or 4 of the people who end up joining her that have it. And maybe, like you said, other heightened senses, because surely there are probably a lot more than just the ones that she met so far that we had in the novel.
I don't even know that this is like relevant, but it also brings up for me the whole like Tylenol caused autism, and like autistic people are super sensitive to like senses and different things. And I don't know why, but just the fact that her mom took something and it gave her this hyper empathy, it just made me think of that. So.
And we do not agree with anyone who says Tylenol causes autism.
I just thought it might be interesting to relate that.
Yep. Yeah, that extra sensory kind of thing. Hello, Josh. How are you today?
Hello, Josh.
Don't give me the Kathy Bates treatment. Now I'm scared. But you did say I'm your biggest, not I'm your number one fan. All right. That's my son, Josh, by the way. So thanks for hopping on, Josh. I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad you're my biggest fan. I'm a pretty big fan of you too. So now we will move on to the symbolism of fire. We've hinted at it within the theme, and now we are going to dig into it big time. So hit me with your fire.
Well, with the way they talk about like the drug pyro, that's the name of it, right? And how it makes it like super satisfying for people to watch burning. And it's the correlation between, usually there's like lust followed by sex, which is then followed by creation or life. But in this scenario, it's lust followed by fire followed by destruction. And so it's interesting to see like how she made it the opposite.
Yes, I agree. Fire is, a prominent force of destruction. And in the novel, communities, including Lauren's neighborhood, are being destroyed by fires. Part of the significance about the fire is that it can be a natural, but also a man-made force. And most of the fires raging across the country, could be naturally occurring, like your wildfires that we see, because a lot of that due to climate change. And then we have these started on purpose by the people who have the painted faces, the addicts of pyro, like you said. And the drug makes the experience of watching a fire, like it says literally in the book, watching the fire burn better than sex. So it encourages addicts to start the fire and then watch it and then burn everything in sight, including people too. And that comparison, exactly like you said, fire being an act of destruction, that kind of lust. And then, biologically, I mean, obviously, every time you have sex, you don't, it's not to create life, obviously. But biologically, I mean, you don't create life, right? Unless you have sex. Right. So that total opposite, like you said, the creation and the destruction. Something else though that I thought about is how fire is also purification. So it's destructive, but it can also be purifying and cleansing, in the sense that, in order to, rise from its ashes, a phoenix first must burn. She says that, that's part of earth seed. So you've got to, purify yourself or burn away some of those things. And you've got to face these hardships in order to go forth armed with knowledge and rise up out of your circumstances. So I just thought about those two kind of opposite meanings for fire also. Anything else about fire?
No.
Okay, I wanted to read some quotes about fire. People are setting fires to get rid of whomever they dislike, from personal enemies to anyone who looks or sounds foreign or racially different. People are setting fires because they're frustrated, angry, hopeless. They have no power to improve their lives, but they have the power to make others even more miserable. And the only way to prove to yourself that you have power is to use it. I think that explains a lot about certain people's mentality. Their lives are shit, and they make themselves feel better by making other people's lives even more shitty. And then they want to watch as it happens to other people, like we talked about a moment ago with the hyper empathy concept. Not only people who don't care about other people, but they revel in the suffering, especially of people who they consider to be others. So that really just hit me and made me think about that kind of mentality. Do you have any?
I don't have any.
Okay. And then when Lauren and some of the others, they go back to their neighborhood and they are plundering their own homes in order to survive. And that devastated me, and that haunts me. And I still can't quit thinking about the bleakness and the horror of having to plunder your own burned house in order to survive. I feel like there's like some sort of deeper. I mean, I know there's a deeper thing. I feel like I have a lot to say about that, but
say it.
I don't know. I don't know if I can Zela said say it. But just the plundering your burned house in order to survive. It's like you're having to go back to something you love that was destroyed, and you're having to pick it apart even further in order to survive. I feel like there's a mini essay or something that's going to come out there. I don't know, but it's just like sticking with me. But before we go on, I want to check the comments and see what we have going on. Little Joshy, I bet he loves that because now he's 23. Yeah, there were like 3 or 4 when you get kind of toward the latter part, maybe even toward the end of the novel. Some of the characters that join up with her on the road, they also have hyper empathy. But I still feel like there would be more out there that she hasn't met. Exactly. Yeah. That was another aspect that we haven't talked about too, like water and how, it wasn't, because of the climate change, it wasn't raining as much and water was hard to come by. And there were the water stations, but there it was dangerous. You could be attacked or murdered trying to get water at the water station. And it just was like, that is bleak because I drink a lot of water and I would not like not to have my water. I will risk my life every time I get my water. So then we're getting there. We're getting to the end. We're getting close. The idea of acorns and planting the hit it, my friend Zela.
Let's see about the acorns. I didn't write a whole lot, but I guess that it seems like they talk a great deal about the acorn bread and how, important it is to their family, kind of that they enjoy it or whatever, and that her dad learned about it from a book from indigenous, what was it, Native Americans?
Yeah, Native Americans.
So like from the beginning, it's kind of been an important part of, I guess, her thought process is thinking and considering and about this seed. I guess you could call an acorn a seed. And like, it makes me wonder if that's like kind of where the whole earth seed thing kind of like was birthed. But and then in the end, how it wraps up where they plant the acorns when all the people are dead.
Exactly what I was thinking too. Exactly, acorns are the symbol of new life, of hope, of possibility. Like you said, that Lauren and her family, they eat acorn bread because her father, like you said, he did find out about it in a book from Native Americans that they use the acorn to make acorn flour and then make bread with it. So acorns, of course, they fall from grown trees and they're planted down in the soil again, and they feed on the nutrients of the soil, which of course is provided by dead plants or dead animals. And then fittingly, the acorn grows into the oak tree. And then at the end of the novel, like you said, they name their new homestead Acorn. So we do need to talk about how eventually along the journey, Banco tells the rest of the group that his sister and her family have a place, and that's where he's trying to go. And he invites them all to come there and establish Earthseed and establish a homestead there. When he gets there, however, the home is burned and his sister and her family are gone. So obviously they're dead. And then they have like a memorial service or an honorary type of service for everyone that died in Lauren's neighborhood and then for Banco's family. And Lauren writes, then we buried our dead and planted oak trees. So I thought that was just beautiful, in the death, the bleakness and the sorrow, but then you still have hope and you're growing something new, right? And then I think we've covered a lot of the aspects about heaven, in Lauren's idea of heaven really being like Belinda Carlisle says, heaven is a place on earth, right? It's something we're going to create, and then maybe go, to the stars with it. So more so than just this idea of an afterlife, it's something tangible that they can experience on earth. Did you have anything about heaven?
I didn't have anything.
All right. So now we are going to go to any quotes that you want to share that you felt like you just appreciated, quotes that you were like, that's beautiful, or quotes that we didn't talk about.
I got them ready.
All right.
Two of them are about like the some earth seed stuff. So I'll read those first. But it says, God is change, and in the end, God prevails. But there's hope and understanding that God is not punishing or jealous, that God is infinitely malleable. And then God is neither good nor evil, neither loving nor hating. God is power, God is change. We must find the rest of what we need within ourselves, in one another, in our destiny. And then the last thing I had was just kind of random, but at some point, somebody, I don't even know who said it, said taking care of people can be a good cure for nightmares.
I love that. I love that. Because that's something, I won't give details, but that's something Zela encouraged me to do recently, was to step out of my comfort zone and go help someone. And because Zela and I both have a lot of stress and a lot of situations we deal with, but she encouraged me to go and help someone else, and I did, and I appreciate her for that. So I do think helping people can help you step outside of your own situation and bring someone else some comfort or joy.
Yeah.
And we'll check these before I share my quotes. Yeah, I agree. That is such a bleak novel throughout, but to even get a glimpse of hope. Yep, they had hope. So a few of the quotes that stood out to me that we didn't talk about. One of them is from Lauren's dad. He said, live. That's all anybody can do right now. Live, hold out, survive. I don't know whether good times are coming back again, but I know that won't matter if we don't survive these times. That too speaks to me on a personal level with my depression too. I think everybody here knows that I have major depressive disorder. So just the idea that, I do think good times will come again, but even if they don't, I won't know. I've got to survive right now. I've got to take it today, and I've got to keep pushing through, and I've got to keep going. And then on a broader context, when I think about what's happening in the United States, I mean, other parts of the world too, but I live in the United States, so it's hard for it not to be the forefront of my mind. But I think about good times coming, like I have to survive the next however many years we have to survive, the next however many years for something good to come again. And then also a line about grief. And again, I feel like everybody who's watching right now knows that my mom is in end-stage Parkinson's, and we really, we have lost her in all essence of the word, physically, mentally. Her body's still here, but it's not her. So it's this extended grief. So this quote about grief hit like that. Something would remind us of the past, of home, of a person, and then we would remember that it was all gone. That person was dead, or probably dead. Everything we'd known and treasured was gone. Very bleak, but I mean, it is real. I feel that everything I knew of my mom is gone. And it feels that way sometimes when we see what's happening around us. It feels like everything we know is gone. It's over. It's destroyed. It's never coming back. But again, I go back to the previous quote that we got to hold on because the good times will come. And then finally, the last quote that I'm going to write this down and like stick it somewhere where I see it every day. The world is full of painful stories. Sometimes it seems as though there aren't any other kinds, and yet I found myself thinking how beautiful that glint of water was through the trees. That's how we hold. I'm gonna get emotional.
Me too.
That's how we. That's how we hold on. Those moments of beauty and joy amidst seasons of sorrow and pain. Appreciating the glint of the water through the trees, the sunrise, the sunset, just having those moments of joy. It's something that I also read from a grief counselor online, that micro joy is how we survive macro grief. And I thought about that too when I read this passage, is that despite all the horrors, you notice that beautiful thing, the cardinal outside your window, something right, that you notice. Do you have any final thoughts now?
Well, related to that, I've been reading that Something in the Woods Loves You by Jared K. Anderson, that memoir about his depression. And everything that he talks about relates to nature, and just that quote makes me think of that whole book. And I'm like probably a little over halfway, but you can borrow it.
I'm going to borrow it. Okay. And just as an aside, Mary Oliver writes beautiful poetry. We're both Mary Oliver. Yes. Beautiful poetry about nature. So I'm going to check our comments now. So Crystal's quote, "We're barely a nation anymore, but I'm glad we're still in space. We have to be going someplace other than down the toilet. Mars is a rock, cold, empty, almost airless, dead. Yet it's heaven in a way." Now my comment clicker doesn't want to roll down.
Why not?
There we go. Yet it's heaven in a way, but too close to the people who've made such a hell of life here on earth. Yep. Major depressive disorder. Yep. Got that hope. Love the acorn trees being planted in memoriam. Yes. Yeah. Burial options today. You can be composted and buried in a forest. It's not macabre. I like that kind of stuff. I want to be cremated, but composted might be even better. We have a garden here. I was going to tell Tim, if I die, just compost me, put me out there in the garden.
I think I just want to, and this is kind of macabre if we're going there, but like, I think it would be cool to have my loved ones' skulls. Like, I don't want to participate in waiting and getting the tissue off of them, but it just sounds cool to be like, that's Chad, sitting on the bookshelf.
And this girl says she's not a fan of horror.
Well, that's not horrifying. It's just part of them, I don't know. I'm not scared of skulls.
I love it. I do too. They just bring me a lot of joy. All kinds of birds, but cardinals are like special. They are special. So we had our final thoughts. Anybody share any final thoughts that you have?
Wait, I didn't give my final thought on the book.
Oh, well, give me your final thought. Okay. Come on. Hit me with the final thought.
I guess my final thought on the book is that all the adults, including like her dad, they just have such misplaced hope. And that's where she's coming in, and she's trying to like give everyone hope to take action and like be what is going to affect change, instead of just like sitting back and waiting, and their hope is in some outside force to make it all better, versus her hope is in herself and like getting people to join her cause. So that's my final thought.
Love that. That was good. Oh, Bejeweled Skulls were a thing.
There you go.
Love for the Cardinals. I like how you talked about Lauren and how she did instead of waiting for other people to do the change or some higher power, she was a catalyst for not only getting herself to make the changes, but sparking other people to join her. That was well said. So y'all keep putting your final thoughts in there. But I am just gonna pop up some read alikes and watch alikes. So 1984 by George Orwell. Obviously, I'm not the first one to say this. It's even on the cover. Brilliant, endlessly rich, pairs well with 1984 or The Handmaid's Tale. That's a quote from John Green. So certainly The Handmaid's Tale, 1984. I did want to also mention books that I haven't read, but that were also mentioned that would pair well with Parable of the Sower. And those are Brown Girl in the Ring by Nalo Hopkinson, Samuel R. Delaney's, I hope I'm saying this right, Dahlgren, Futureland by Walter Mosley, and Who Fears Death by Needy Okorafor. I've heard that name. So Needy Okorafor's Who Fears Death. And then I wanted to show this book, which is directly inspired from Parable of the Sower, with the title A Phoenix First Must Burn, and it is edited by Patrice Caldwell. And this is an anthology with fantasy, science fiction, and magic through the Black experience. I've read some of the stories in it. I haven't finished it yet, but I loved every story that I've read so far from it. Were there any books that you know of that I didn't mention?
Just for myself, I don't know that it's a complete corollary, but if anybody's read the Red Rising series, it talks a lot about like social hierarchy and a fight for justice. And so I thought it might be similar, but not the same, obviously.
I'll put that on my never ending TBR. So let us know in the comments.
I think it's sci-fi. I don't read a ton of sci-fi, but that was a good series.
Bring back family crypts. Yeah. Just don't go down in anybody's crypt with your cask of Amontillado. Yes, exactly. The other countries, it was mentioned that this was something that was happening in the United States. Yeah, because of as you said, the powers that be in the United States had brought about a lot of the problems. I would say even, obviously like the climate change is something that's is a worldwide issue. But there are other countries who do a lot more, to protect the environment than the United States does. Exactly. You can't be passive. You got to get up off your butt and do the hard things. Totally agree. Oh, Soylent Green. There you go. I'm ashamed to admit I never watched that. I only know the line that I feel like everybody knows from Soylent Green. It's people, like, but I'm sure it's really more in depth than the kind of, parody or lightheartedness that's been made out of it. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Stina. And thank you, Zela. The conversation couldn't have been as good as it was without you. Oh, yeah, The Girl with All the Gifts. That is a good one. I read the book. No, I didn't read the book. I watched the movie a few years ago, but I do want to read the book too. The Girl with All the Gifts. Yes. Okay, see, I need to read the book. See, I didn't know Soylent Green was based on a book either. So make room, make room. We'll check that out. Y'all are popping off in the comments. Thank you. I bet, I bet. But that's kind of the theme. Like Parable of the Sower was a little scary to read. So okay, Logan's Run. I have heard about it, but I have not read it.
The whole movie.
Yeah. There's a movie, yeah. I think it's a book too, though, right? The Freedom Race. Okay, thank you. These are all great ideas, for sure. Children of Men. Okay. Girl with All the Gifts. Yeah, like I said, I like the movie a lot, but I have not read the book yet. Usually I try to read the book and then watch the movie, but it doesn't always happen.
Zelda.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. So just briefly, finally, I do want to say that there is an adaptation, a film adaptation for Parable of the Sower. I just was, reading and found out about it. So the information I got was from variety.com in an article from April of this year. But I'm going to try to say this director's name right. And I should have looked it up before I attempted to say her name. Let me find it so I can at least make an attempt to say it. Melina Matsoukas is set to both direct and produce the film adaptation of Parable of the Sower. I don't know when it's coming out. The information from Variety just said she was set to produce and direct it for Warner Brothers. So we'll keep that on our radar, the film adaptation for Parable of the Sower, and keep our fingers crossed that it does the book justice. You are so welcome. You're so welcome, Swank. Thank you for being here. Hey, she'll take it, but yeah, Zela. Zela. So just thank you all again. I appreciate your patience. I know that we went long today. We are about 2 hours, so we will say goodbye now. Thank you for hanging in here. For anyone who is catching us on the replay, thank you so much for watching. Please put down in the comments your answers to all of the questions or a few of the questions, whatever your choice is, about what we talked about. And so any future plans that you want to share with us, Zela?
I am very chaotic, and I don't necessarily have any plans until I have plans. So I love
it.
I mean, I have my art page, but it comes and goes. So
life. Sometimes we can't always get to what we want to get to, but you'll get into that art.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of your art. So the next book club pick is for July, and our next one is, I should know this. I think the next one is What Hunger by Catherine Dane. That's I think that's July. If it's not What Hunger, then it's Never Let Me Go. But I think it is What Hunger. Y'all can check my socials and see, and I will let you all know, of course. And then Tuesday, I will have my self-care sprints coming up on Sunday, July 12th. I'll be doing my summer version of a virtual tea party. So I hope you all can make that. My filming schedule is a little bit up in the air right now because it's summer and Rena's home. But the sprints and the tea party are on the schedule coming up. And I am thankful to each of you for being here. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night, wherever you are. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you and happy reading.